Welcome back to episode 47 of Establish the Collection. It is our Leroy ETN episode 47. Gary, do you know who Leroy ETN is?
I don't.
You quick Google him while I finish our intro here, because I didn't want to derail the show too much. But you hijacked the show last week, so
I gotcha.
I'm hijacking the show back.
If you gave me odds, I would have guessed Nebraska football.
Okay.
So there we go. Looks like 1988.
Yep, best player to don the 47 for my Nebraska Cornhuskers, linebacker from 1985 to 1988. Sorry to completely get us off track here, but of course, I am your host, Cody Main, joined, as always, by Gary Hartman. We're catching Gary on a Friday afternoon before he plans to leave the country, leave us for a couple of weeks. First of all, Gary, very excited for you and your lovely bride getting to take some time away now that basketball season has officially wrapped up. Buddy, how are things going today?
Yeah, good run out for me. We're recording this on Friday, the day after the NBA Finals wrapped. I was praying it would end in 6 games, because if not, I was going to be up at 2 a.m. in Spain watching Game 7, which I'm glad I don't have to do. So yeah, all good here. I like our Leroy ETN episode. The only person I could think of was Andre Karolinko, former, I guess, NBA All-Star. But, no offense to any Russian fans of this show. I don't think we should give Russia its fair due as far as naming episodes after them right now with everything going on in Ukraine. I like Leroy ETN for our 47.
A fair take with with the NBA Finals wrapped up, buddy. Why don't we just dive right into what that means for some of these guys that we just saw on the court? The obvious ones, why don't we just get those out of the way first and foremost? Steph Curry finally gets one. I say finally gets one after Kevin Durant leaves. With this iteration of the team, as we had talked about on previous episodes, this is actually meaningful for him, man. Like, Steph didn't need to do anything to add to his legacy. One of the best point guards of all time. Probably now, I hate doing these conversations, but probably now in the top 10 consideration. Greatest shooter of all time was already a given. Didn't matter what he did this postseason. But man, like, this run with this version of this team, with some of the games that Klay and Draymond had, which, we can get into, he really carried this team. And along with another guy who played really well in this series against the Celtics. What does this series and this ring mean for Steph Curry's card market and his legacy?
Well, you say finally gets one, and he did finally get his Finals MVP. So
that's right.
Probably pretty preposterous that he hadn't up to this point. I mean, especially the Andre Iguodala award. I think people were enamored with him. You could say trying to shut down LeBron. LeBron still had 30 points a game in that series, whatever. But it's a one more piece of hardware that he didn't have that just basically, as you mentioned, top 10. I mean, we don't need to get into that kind of stuff right now. I think it's pretty hard to leave him out that top 10, top 12 at this point. 4 rings. We talked about this a little bit. Brings him into new territory. So all of him, Draymond, Iguodala, and Klay just got their 4th ring. Obviously, Steph is the, center, the universe in which that Warriors team orbits around. And, that puts him on with LeBron. It puts him on with Shaq in that 4-ring territory, not quite at 5 with Magic and, Duncan and Kobe yet. But I don't think it's out of the possibility that he gets there. I mean,
not at all.
4 rings in 8 years now for Golden State. And what they just proved this year is this dynasty is not done, my friend. It is not done. And if anything, it's reinvigorated. Klay, I think we can expect to see come back looking even better next year as he finally gets his sea legs back under him. Obviously, wasn't as efficient, but, was pretty big in the finals. Draymond was up and down in this playoffs, but the last 2 games looked fantastic. And then when you just take into the account that Jordan Poole is a budding star, Andrew Wiggins, we'll talk about him. I think he deserves the most attention here, but really finally taking that step to what made him the number 1 overall pick in 2013 and really just an excellent series. And, the sky's the limit for what he could be as long as he stays on this team. And then obviously some other young talent like Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody and guys that are James Wiseman still, somewhere around, just guys that will be able to shuffle into this mix, 5, 6, not out of the realm of possibility for Steph. We've spoken ad nauseum about his cemented legacy, especially from a hobby perspective. And then we're going to, second half of this pod, we're going to talk kind of macro view of the market right now. But if there was any person that I'd feel comfortable keeping your money in, even as the card industry struggles, the economy struggles as a whole, it's Steph Curry, who does find his, base tops PSA 10 up over the last 3 months, almost 29%, which is kind of crazy to think about. I mean, was all the way down to almost a $7,000 card at the beginning of May. Now only a pop of 365. Not going to find it for under 10 grand now. So that's going to be consistently cemented as a 5-figure card, I think, no matter how you shake things out. Up 20% over the last 2 weeks on 4 sales. So no data. Definitely some data. Not surprised. Big money, big stuff for Steph.
Obviously, really encouraging stuff. And the macro stuff at the end of this podcast, I hope you guys stick around for it and hope you guys get a lot of value out of it, because I think Gary obviously is especially uniquely qualified to talk about this stuff. But I think the most encouraging thing here from a micro standpoint on looking at Steph stuff is you can see that collectors from all price ranges want to get their hands on Steph stuff just based off of prices over the last month. I mean, you look at his 2009 Panini base in a BGS 9.5. That card is up over 100% over the last month. Some of the stuff at the lower range, that's a $799 card now. His 2009 Prestige base in a PSA 9 up 54% is a $279 card. His 2019 Prism Silver in a PSA 10 up 50%. Like, all of this stuff just goes to show that on court, on field performance and achievements and legacy building type things still matter for card prices, which is something that's obviously encouraging for us who are trying to prognosticate those things. But yeah, the market might be down, stocks might be down, crypto might be down, NFTs might be down. We might all be scrambling to find a place to put our money, but we're still finding these edges where card prices are continuing to improve on certain guys and at all price ranges. So I think that's the most encouraging takeaway for me looking at Steph Curry's market after, obviously not a whole lot of sales data after the finals win, but just with this run over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I'll give one card I like if you are trying to buy the dip overall as a card in the card market, and you want that to be in the form of Steph Curry. Obviously, we talk about kind of his grail cards are never going really down. And in this case, they're going to go up, and stuff with super rarity will probably stay stagnant. But I like, still 2012 Prism, first Prism class. I think his base in a PSA 10, it's the pop's still under 600. So, we talk about base. That's one of the few classes that I think I'm okay investing in. But because it is a base card and because it is not as rookie, just his first Prism, you are seeing that kind of take the hits of the market as well, down about 15% over the last 2 weeks, 6% over the last month. But that card's not dipped under $300, which to me, at a 598 pop, when the market does recover, I don't know if it's going to be a year, 2 years, whenever the economy is in a healthier spot, that will be the kind of card that immediately jumps back up. I mean, those are the kind of cards that we saw have huge ceilings. Even in a base, obviously, silvers and things like that, but have really, really high ceilings, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Right. So I think that's the kind of card that I would be looking at if you're looking to buy the dip on a Steph Curry. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to just kind of hold any Steph.
All right. Another guy from that was a rookie in that 2012 class, Klay Thompson. Very limited sales data on Klay, actually, even recently. And in fact, the only card that has shown a positive change over the last month is 2018 Kaboom, and a PSA 10 is up 9%. What does this finals mean for Klay Thompson and his market? Is he a buy for you at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think Klay's a super interesting guy because the approval rating on Klay is as high as you get, maybe alongside Steph. I mean, he's going to be first ballot Hall of Famer with the chance to add to his legacy here over the next couple of years. 4 rings. I think, honestly, even just after this season, he probably would have cracked that top 75 all-time list now with this extra ring and him coming back from this injury. So, probably when it's all said and done, going to be top 50, 60 player in league history, one of the top 3 or 4 shooters of all time. So I've always been bullish on Klay as a buy. I think that anything you find that's super rare from Klay is going to remain pretty high end, I think. Yeah. So like a silver 2012 Prism, for example, I think be something that is pretty hard to find in any, there's no sales data on it, right? It's only a pop of 24. Card ladder values it at a PSA 10 at $4,600. I would think it's way higher than that. I think if one went up for market right now, that goes for like 7-8 right now, just because there's no data really on that. There's been one sale over the last year, and that's what they're basing it off of. It was almost $5,000. So yeah. I think now that with this other title and with him back, that sale was all the way back, I guess it was in April. But, so I think, anything like that for Klay, I think is super safe. I think, again, similar thing, like his base PSA 10, I have a couple of those pops under 1,000. It's almost double the pop of, or like 40% more than the pop of Steph, because that is his true rookie. Don't mind it, because again, like the type of base you're getting from 2012 is not the same type of base of ultra modern. So yeah, I think those are interesting buys. I think it would flatten out here in the off season. Right around that $300, $290 to $330 value on that card. And I think that's a fine place to hold some of your money. I don't think it's ever going to take any massive dives. So it's more of a safe piece for me is Klay.
I think the conversation's almost the same for the other guy, the other part of this big three on this team, that same class, 2012 Prism for Draymond Green. I'm looking at Card Ladder. I actually don't see a PSA 10 in his Prism Silver. PSA 9 valued right now at $1,000, last sold in October 2020. So just extremely low pop count. And I think to your point on that stuff, this higher end stuff for these Warriors guys, especially these big three, which includes Draymond, anyone that actually wants to collect Warriors stuff is going to have a hard time getting their hands on Draymond and Klay stuff. And I think that that's going to keep prices up when there's actually interest from true collectors, along with the investing side of it as well. So I don't think the conversation changes much for Klay. I guess the price point might be a little bit different. Equally hard to get your hands on this stuff with such low pop counts. And the one thing with Draymond, like Draymond's going to stay relevant well past his playing days. Yep. And although the approval rating isn't there, the fact that he's such divisive maybe isn't the right term, but a guy that polarizing is the right term that I was looking for. Such a polarizing guy. I think that's going to keep his market relatively stable as well, although at lower price points.
Yeah. And also the other thing we should mention here, and the reason that the high end stuff is really, really safe for this, big three, dynasty of this big three, is there's now like, there are major just collectors of this dynasty out there, and guys that want to scoop up any kind of patch auto, high end refractors, high end rookies of any of these three guys, wherever they can get it. You can even throw an Andre Iguodala in there. Like these guys that have been around for all four of these rings, these guys want all of that high-end stuff, and there are real Warriors collectors out there, so you'll never have a hard time selling off any of that stuff. So if you happen to have something like a Draymond, National Treasures patch auto, Klay, anything like that, I think you're fine. You want to sell it, you'll be able to make your money. I think that these are also, again, as opposed to someone like the ultra-modern guys, and even someone like Jason Tatum, who we'll talk about on the other side, I think these types of just $200-$300 base Prism rookie stuff is a really safe place just to hold your money if you want to do it. I don't think it's ever going to dive to I don't think a Draymond rookie is ever diving to $100. I think it's going to stay between 180 and 250, and that's fine, right? It's like it's just a much safer place to put your money, like throwing your money into like a CD instead of full on individual stocks. I think is kind of what you're looking at with these $300 base PSA 10 of Draymond Klay type cards. So don't mind it. Pops are low. Good, great Hall of Fame players, interesting guys.
All right, let's talk the last guy. The most interesting guy of this iteration of the Warriors team was not a member of the Dynasty, has had a rocky career, but has seemingly found himself not just with the Warriors, but especially in this finals, was an absolute baller. And the post-game stuff with him in the locker room with Jordan Poole and those guys was really awesome to see. Fantastic. Really happy for Andrew Wiggins. You've got him pegged as the most interesting name to talk about from a hobby perspective. Why don't you take it from there? Why is Andrew Wiggins such an interesting name for you right now?
Not even close. This is by far the most interesting case in the hobby in a while, actually. And if the economy wasn't in such a crappy spot as it is right now, I mean, I think we'd see his stuff soaring even higher, but it's soaring pretty high, as high as it's been since those, maybe second, third year when people were still speculating really high on Andrew Wiggins. But let's not forget, this was one of the biggest prospects of the last 10 to 12 years. I mean, coming out, people thought he was a sure thing out of Kansas in his rookie year, Canadian kid, one of those names that was on the radar for years. So he was drafted in 2014, first overall. But I mean, we'd been talking about Andrew Wiggins since like 2011 as like this phenom coming out of Canada. And for the first 7 years of his career, I guess at this point, pretty largely disappointing. I mean, complete bust to not, he was hanging around. He got paid because he was able to score. He's a professional scorer. But the one thing people thought about him coming out was sure thing on the defensive end. Did not show that. Athlete that'll just kind of jump off the floor, was very good athletic wise, but didn't kind of take it to what we've seen out of Anthony Edwards in his first couple of years, where it's going to like actually catapult him into the conversation night in and night out, and just didn't necessarily have kind of fuck you attitude that you needed to make that, athleticism pop. Yet gets traded to Golden State in what is going to go down as one of the best trades of all time. I mean, basically D'Angelo Russell and James Wiseman, or Jonathan Kuminga actually, which is insane, right. even better. For Andrew Wiggins, who was the unsung hero of this series. If it was not for Steph Curry, he would have been in the MVP. I mean, set his career high in rebounds twice in this series, was a menace on the defensive end, guarding Jason Tatum every night, hit threes, looked like the player that we were expecting him to be for his whole career, which is a two-way superstar. Honestly, you played like a superstar. Here's what we can't forget. He's only 27.
Only 27. It's crazy.
He's only 27. He was on a crappy Minnesota Timberwolves team for a lot of his career. I don't think he had the right motivation around him. I don't think him paired with Karl Anthony Towns was a good combination. I don't think him when it was Ryan Saunders there was necessarily good. I don't even think he's the kind of guy to thrive under Tibbs. So it takes him getting to Steve Kerr, Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, and this foundation to bring out the best in him. Now he knows what it takes to win. He knows what it's like to be a champion. I don't think they're going to let him go. Kind of step into that KD spot on this team. I think the sky's the limit now for him, and he still should have another 12, 13 years in his career. I mean, you don't see this that much where it's like a true late bloomer, but I think that's what we have here. And, this was someone that people lost a lot of money on in the market, that if you were able to kind of stay tight, I think you're going to have a chance to make it back, especially as the economy recovers a little bit here. So let's just look at his, base PSA 10 out of 2014, another class that did not have super high pops. That pops under 900 altogether. Still only valued at a $92 card. I think that's low now. I'm sure all these sales over the next couple of days are going to be over $100. But we're still seeing over the last 3 months a growth of 117%. I sold this week a patch auto out of 2019-20 Immaculate, which was his first Warriors card out of 15 for like $400. So I think like some of your patch auto stuff on him is going to be really high. I'm seeing a lot of Wiggins collectors come out of the woodwork here. Really interesting. Just a fascinating hobby case, because somebody that people were investing in so heavily, 8 years ago, is now finally reached maybe what we thought it could be, and has a ring now on his finger. So it's really interesting.
You could really run into a perfect scenario here where all those stars kind of do start to align, where you had a heavy slew of people who were investing in Wiggins in 2014, 2015, and maybe held on long enough to realize some of their gains now. But you also have the extremely low pop count on all this stuff. Looking ahead is Silver in a PSA 10, which again, these prices are going to change drastically over the next 5 to 7 days. I would imagine even in a down market, that Silver PSA 10 $375 card last sold for $337. I mean, it's got a pop count of 71, right? Anyone that's wanting to get their hands on Wiggins stuff is going to have a hard time doing so. And you can't overstate the change in situation and why that might be meaningful for him going forward. 26, 27-year-old kid is now under probably the best situation in the league after being under one of the worst situations in the league. Not unreasonable to think that he kind of uses this as a stepping stone into this second or third stage of his career, where he becomes, a true perennial guy that we're talking about and remains hobby relevant for a long time to come. So I love that shout with Wiggins.
I'm just looking at all the sales from last night. Looks like people scooped up every single $100 buy it now PSA absolutely. 10 in the base. So we, again, Card Ladder has that undervalued right now for at 94. It'll be at least 100, but it'll probably, I'm guessing all the ones will be ending over 100 now for that base Prism. Looks like people were buying up any kind of patch auto stuff they could buy. I see Kaboom went for 500 last night from 2015, second year Kaboom. So I think that this stuff, obviously that's going to play off the hype of just winning the championship. But, again, let's see. I mean, I don't know how long he'll be in Golden State. They have him under a max contract, I think, for a couple more years here. He could win another championship. He could take this right to the top. And then again, we could see him kind of slide back if he ever kind of gets his own team again into what we saw from the first 7 years of his career. But usually you don't see things like that happen. Obviously the pedigree was there. Doesn't happen often, as I said, with the late bloomer, but only 27. I think it's fascinating. I'm not doing anything with Andrew Wiggins right now, so right. I shouldn't say this. I just think it's a fascinating hobby case to talk about. And if you want to take your wins, if you were one of those guys that kind of just got stuck with the Andrew Wiggins bag for 5 years, take your outs right now. I have no problem with that. I sold off whatever. I've never been an investor in Andrew Wiggins, but just from having a ton of cards, I sold off a lot of my Wiggins over the last week and felt good about doing so.
Perfect. I don't have much to add on Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, James Wiseman. If you want to just skip those guys, we can touch on those during the offseason episodes. Is there anything interesting to take away from those guys at this point, or should we just wait?
Just Poole. I mean, we spoke about him a lot already. His stuff has stayed pretty actually strong throughout this run here. It wasn't that peak that we spoke about like a month ago, but I mean, I saw a base Prism rookie raw last night for like $280.
Wow.
Like it's just a bit, just like that. Just like the base signatures, like I have no idea if it'll grade at all. To me, that's like a $90 card. So I feel like I'm taking wins on Poole still. I think that there's a lot of room for him to grow. I think he could be a really, really good player. So no problem if you're one of those people that were trying to invest in Poole this season. Maybe you'll have a couple times during the offseason, but I think he's still a sell right now for me as the hype kind of remains strong. He's been a really interesting hobby case as well.
The obvious name to get to on the other side, a guy that we've talked about so often, just knocking on that doorstep of superstardom, looked like he was right there, man. Had some moments in the finals, obviously had some moments throughout the playoffs where he looked otherworldly, looked like he was going to be one of those true elite guys, but kind of took a step back here in a little bit in the finals, and that's Jason Tatum. Averaged 21-6 or 21-7-7, had a good series, but it looked like he took a little bit of a backseat here. Had some struggles there in game 6. Anything to take away from this series with Tatum? Do you think collectors are going to start getting a little bit worried about this guy, or do you think that he did enough throughout this postseason to warrant interest going forward?
Obviously, it was super impressive that he was even able to get his team to where they were. The Celtics team kind of took the All-Star break, took the time after the All-Star break and surprised everyone, becoming the best team in the league for the majority of this run. That said, there's no doubt that he struggled in this series. Had a couple decent games, but it did seem like the stage may have been a little too big for him. The Warriors, the experience, all that kind of stuff there. They're reckless with the ball. Both him and Jaylen Brown turned the ball over way too much. So there's a lot of room to grow. If for one, Jason Tatum, he is, not even joking about it. He's only 24, I believe. So lots, he's only 24 years old. Lots and lots of more opportunity probably coming Jason Tatum's way. So if you kind of want to get into the dog days of the offseason and buy some Jason Tatum, I don't have any problem with that, but you're not getting any, your sales opportunities are over. He's been down actually during the finals. He's even his silver PSA 10 is down 23% over the last 2 weeks. I think people kind of read the way the series was going and reacted accordingly. Almost completely different than what we were just talking about with the Warriors guys. Not interested in talking his base here, that 2017. It's not the same kind of pops as Zion or Moran or people of the later years, but we're still talking like a 6,000 pop there. That would be a stay away for me for the time being.
I hate to completely skip over the rest of this team, but we talked about Jaylen Brown a little bit. Really hasn't gotten the hobby love yet to this point. I think there might be a little bit of an interesting discussion there, but there really aren't too many hobby names to really discuss on this Celtics team. Anyone else you want to mention before we kind of move on to a little bit more macro discussion here?
Yeah, no, not really. Jaylen got exposed a little bit here. I still really believe in his talent. I just think I think there's some lessons to be taken away from Jaylen Brown as far as the guy really can't handle. So he's an excellent elite scorer, very good defender. But, when he puts the ball on the ground, it's trouble. And I think that people and GMs might take something from that as from kind of a second superstar, like especially with the positionless basketball here. We want people that can really handle the ball. I wonder if that's going to affect him moving forward a little bit. I think on the right team, he could really keep budding as a star. And he is a budding superstar, also very young. But, I would be fine, during the dog days of the offseason when it's just baseball out there. If you could find a silver Jaylen, a patch auto Jaylen for, 10% under comps, 15% under comps, he's still the guy that I'd be fine buying. But I'm not, going out of my way to run in by Jaylen right now because I don't necessarily think, it's not because I don't believe in the talent, but I don't think necessarily the hobby and the NBA world is, going to be talking and singing Jaylen Brown's praises right now where you're going to be kind of having immediate delta there. So. Right,
exactly. I think this is, with you going away for a couple of weeks, with basketball wrapping up, with football still a few months out, I think this is kind of a perfect time here to do just kind of a macro overview, a little bit of a reset. I know the last time we kind of talked macro card market stuff was heading into this year and kind of our plans with our collectibles investing heading into January of 2022. Things have shifted pretty drastically, I would say, from just an overall economic standpoint. And we're sports cards collectors, we're sports card investors. We've been dealing with the brunt of a bear market for a while now. Prices have definitely cooled for the better part of 6 months. So we're no stranger to this, but we're starting to see this bear market hit stocks and crypto and NFTs, which had just been on a parabolic rise for a while. Obviously, inflation is out of control now. It doesn't really feel like there's a good spot to store your money. Do you think that this kind of this economic wave that we're dealing with, this bear market that we seem to be going into, is going to have an even further impact on card prices? Or, I mean, like I said, we've been dealing with this for a few months now, where everything seems to be cooling off, except for certain high end prices. Are we going to be in for a long winter here with card prices cooling even more, or are we kind of stabilizing a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm no economist, and I don't think either of us would call each other experts in the financial side of things. What does worry me is that we could be on the brink of a recession as a nation as a whole, and I don't want to get into too much there. I'm not an economist, but you could read all the tea leaves. The inflation side of things really, really is scary, and as you mentioned right off the top here, kind of finding a place to store your money in general is a hard thing right now. Usually when we see recessions in this country, or real downturns in the stock market, things like gold go up, and that's been historical. And while it is up a little bit right now, gold and in an okay spot, usually we see it take a complete higher road than this when interest rates are this high and things like that. So if even gold not doing as strong as we would like to see it be doing right now, clearly crypto hasn't been the thing that has been the alternative asset to kind of thrive while the market's down. There's no reason to think sports cards would be either. And that's kind of where we're at with cards. That said, I do think with the super, super high end stuff, there's way worse places to store your money. Way worse. And I'm talking like Grail, like super safe. Like the Steph Curry stuff we were just talking about. And even if you look at the card ladder 50, and I think we should talk about some of these indexes here in kind of a macro view, the card ladder 50 compared to the rest of which is, a nice view of kind of modern and vintage, is down 9% this quarter. Compared to the stock market, that's not as high as, we would see. So I do think, as far as a bottom is concerned of really, really grail chase cards, I think there's less of a bottom in those cards than there is in the stock market right now. So I think that I just generally, I do think that's true. I think your mid tier and your low end cards are a real dangerous place to be. Those could bottom out for sure. Yeah. And I don't think we've seen the bottom here, because I don't think we've seen the bottom from an economic standpoint. And that scares me as a whole. Just taking a general look, kind of overview. If you go to Card Ladder and you go to their indexes, you can do it by sport. Only 3 sports pretty much, or 4, I guess, are at either a positive or neutral spot right now over, I guess, what is over the last month. Wrestling, because WWE Prism came out, I guess, and that's kind of establishing itself as a market, is up 1%. Golf is about neutral. Also makes sense. More products come out for golf. Golf's becoming more popular. Majors are around. Has all the interest about the live stuff right now. That makes some sense. Tiger's one of those guys that I think is okay to put your money into. One of the guys I was talking about. So I think that's also there. Hockey also been at the forefront, right at the peak of their championship race here. So it makes sense for that to be. And then the one that I actually still feel pretty good about is racing. Formula One is basically a net neutral over the last month. And I honestly would expect that to continue throughout this F1 season, because the hype remains there, the international appeal remains there, and the scarcity, especially of the 2020 stuff, remains there. So I think there are places to put your money in the card market. I just, as you mentioned, like anything else, you're not going to necessarily feel great about putting your money in anything right now. Maybe real estate, but there's always a chance for that to fumble as well. So I know it seems bleak and it sounds bleak, but I don't mean to be Mr. Debbie Downer over here, but no matter where you turn right now from an economic standpoint, it seems bleak.
Well, and I think that's the hard part from this podcast perspective, because we're always trying to dissect things from an on-field / on-court, on ice, on-track perspective, right? And how that might impact the market. But when the market's down as a whole, it's tough to recommend, proper buying / selling windows when there's just more macro things in play here, like a general market downturn. I think a lot of the things that you hit on in terms of where you should be focusing are really sharp. And I think obviously, PSA 10 graded cards, I think will remain and have a higher premium, obviously, than raw and ungraded stuff or poorly graded stuff, especially in this ultra modern, could just get completely wiped as we see people try to chase the bottom. I think even some of this for stars, some of the higher pop count stuff for guys that we're generally excited to collect, I think that bottom could fall a little bit more with pop counts, low end base stuff for guys, even like Herbert or Burrow, or some of those guys that are going to start having higher pop counts.
Even like Juan Soto and guys in baseball, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the point being here, as we take kind of a macro stance on this market, is focusing on higher end stuff, graded stuff, and stuff that actually has true scarcity to it. Right. So, if you don't have the type of budget right now to invest in that type of stuff, or not feeling super confident in that stuff, I think you can get your hands on it fractionally still, as a way to get exposure to it. And I know the fractional market hasn't exactly tailed the physical market in some respects. And sometimes it seems like it lags too far behind and you're never going to catch those returns, even though it feels like it's undervalued on fractional sites like Dibs and Rally and Collectible and Otis. But you still have that upside of a collector coming and offering a buyout, or, just finally the fractional market, retail investors catching up to what these things should truly be valued at. One that really stood out to me recently was a 1948 Leaf Jackie Robinson in a PSA 8. Vintage card, got a pop count of 40 with just a few higher. A card that, obviously you're not going to see much more anymore in circulation at this point. And Jackie Robinson is Jackie freaking Robinson, right? There's nothing else to be said at that point. On Rally has a $310,000 market cap, last sold for $468,000, has a card ladder value of $509,000 right now, right? Like, if you want to get a little bit of exposure to that on Rally, it feels like it might be a little bit undervalued on a fractional site like that. So I think keeping your mind open to those opportunities is something that would serve people in this type of market, just specific buying opportunities of stuff that is seemingly undervalued.
So that's what I was going to transition into next, actually. I think, and fractional is a great place to do this, but as bleak as my first preamble of this whole conversation sounded, I would be putting my money into cards. The question is the right cards. And I actually, I legitimately think this is one of the safer places to keep your money if you're doing it in the correct way. So your Jackie Robinson example you just put is a perfect example of that. And I think we can actually get some value here. Looking at trends, let's look at individual player card indexes from Card Ladder here. My sharing my screen isn't working, but it doesn't matter. Most of you are listening to this on audio. So if you go to card indexes, you can go down on Card Ladder into the players section, okay? And it basically is going to take all the major players, modern and vintage, and kind of give you a monthly outlook of their market. Now, guys like LeBron James and Michael Jordan, you're going to see are down around 10%, like the rest of these market, and that's not surprising. The reason that this is because things like the 2003 Topps Chrome Refractor, things like the 1986 Michael Jordan rookie got up so freaking high during the peak or the bubble or whatever you will, that it's just gonna continue to go down until it reaches a nice plateau of where those cards should be. The refractor LeBron card, for example, I think got up to like $140,000 a year ago, and is now like a $38,000.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And that's probably a more safe place for that card to be. And so I think that there are obviously some, trends to look at from guys like that. However, guys that are either positive or neutral, I think or down in like single digits percent, right? Almost every major vintage baseball player has not taken major hits. So we talk about Mickey Mantle, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays. Willie Mays is up. Jackie Robinson's up. Mickey Mantle's down 1%. Babe Ruth is down 3%. Hank Aaron's down 3%. These are amazing numbers compared to what you're seeing for guys like Albert Pujols, down 20%. Roberto Clemente only down 1%. These are names that are, to me, Ken Griffey's up 4% on his major stuff, right? Derek Jeter's probably going to go up now with the documentary coming out. There's guys to invest in the baseball side of things, which is really interesting. And it also makes sense because it's the true vintage of all sports cards. Baseball as a whole is on right now. There's interest in it. Baseball from the four major sports indexes is down by far the least amount of between basketball and football, which are down 10%. Baseball's only down 3%. So that's a really interesting place to look to put your money, I think, if you can, especially in fractional. You mentioned the Jackie Robinson side of things. That's really interesting. The same thing could be said for basketball. Bill Russell's even. Magic Johnson's about even. Michael Jordan, again, I think besides kind of that huge dip on the 86 card, is going to be pretty close to even or up. So I think, finding guys like that makes a ton of sense. And then there's also some outliers with modern. F1 for sure. Verstappen's up. Lewis is down a little bit, but Verstappen's up. George Russell's up. Things like that are going to continue to go up as those cards kind of continue to kind of just even come into the market. There's not many high graded cards of those kind of things. So I think there's places there. And then we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Quarterbacks aren't taking too much of a hit. Josh Allen's up right now. Joe Burrow's only down 5%, which isn't that bad for what we might think of what he would be taking hit this offseason. I think Herbert's only taken a 7% hit over the last month. Compared to what we would think for these major guys, I don't think it's bad. Tom Brady's obviously a pretty safe place for your money. So if you do this correctly, there's places to go. The question is how you do it and if it can be affordable. Now, if you're trying to get your money completely out of stocks and like you're taking a ton of money out, you could do it. You could go and buy a $20,000 Tom Brady card and do it that way. You could buy a $50,000 Jackie Robinson card and do it that way. And honestly, I don't think it's a terrible move. Obviously, it's a big life decision. I completely understand that, but I don't think it's a terrible move. It's the same, similar to putting your money into gold or an alternative asset that might appreciate. The problem is there's very small spots within this market that you're going to be able to do that. Besides that, you're going to take a hit like everything else, and that's basically what we're saying here. If you're trying to into bulk or ultra modern, even just regular modern or high pop, you're going to take hits. You're just going to take hits like the rest of the market is. Did all that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a checklist. And I think you perfectly ran through the checklist of things that you should be looking for at this point. It's not just the right player, but the right card of the right player in the right grade with the right amount of scarcity, stuff that is truly, truly scarce for the certain players that we're looking to invest in. And you nailed a ton of them. I have no issue with people wanting to invest right now in Josh Allen, wanting to invest in Joe Burrow, wanting to invest in Justin Herbert. I think it just matters about finding the right stuff. And maybe even at this point now with dealing with potentially an upcoming recession, with inflation, with interest rates and all of this stuff that is potentially impacting alternative forms of investing, sports cards being one of them, we're going to have to be really careful about where we do place our money. All of those vintage baseball players that you mentioned are going to have a market forever. They've had a market forever through, before the pandemic rise, through the pandemic rise, after the rise of the sports cards. Those have remained extremely hot. I think that high-end sports cards will remain a safe place to store your money. And when there's a collecting aspect to this thing where people do truly want to hold on to these assets, it's going to keep the market afloat, although it may not be as liquid as it once was with, some of these higher pop stuff. Another specific card that I wanted to mention on Rally, 1976 Topps Walter Payton rookie card was one that I identified as a buy a while ago. And yeah, it's down 15% since it IPO'd. But this is one where I think if fractional catches up with the true value of this physical card, we could see a little bit of a spike here over the next couple of months or years even. We saw that this card, when IPO'd, and since it has IPO'd, has sold a couple of times. Back in October of 2021 for 61 grand, in January of 2022 for 78 grand, all the way up to 114 grand in February of 2022. Still, May 21st, 2022, just 3-4 weeks ago, sold for 96 grand. So you can grab shares of that exact card in a PSA 10, one of just 53 in existence. For 50, valued right now on Rally for $55,000, $5.50 a share, right? So maybe there's an investor out there that wants to buy this card from Rally outright and submits a bid. Maybe fractional retail investors like myself realize that this is an undervalued asset. You've got a couple of outs there. I think that is one that specifically sets up as undervalued, but I think there's a consistent theme. We don't talk vintage a lot on this show really at all.
But it's the place you want your money right now. I'm telling you,
it seems like a good place to put your money right now.
100%. Yeah. And that's always been the case. We've been trying to kind of take your big swings, but as far as the safe side of things, vintage has always been the place to keep your money. Walter Payton, Jim Brown, Jerry Rice. It's the same as those Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays types that we're gonna. It's very similar across the board in basketball too. Kareem and Bill Russell and those guys will be similar in that sense. So yeah, I mean that all makes a ton of sense to me. I do want to shift real quick here and ask a question that I think that a lot of people might be having. I feel like I was late to the party. I feel like I invested in a lot of stuff before I had a great grasp of the hobby and where I should be placing my money. I think a lot of people did the same thing, probably just dove in head first, figured I'll figure out
after I get my feet wet where I really need to put my money. I've got a lot of stuff that I know has lost a lot in value. What should people be doing now with stuff that they bought during this pandemic run up, maybe bought it at an all-time high, has maybe lost 50, 60, 75% of the value since they bought it? What should people be doing with those cards at this point? Is it time to just say, forget it, cut my losses, I can rebalance my portfolio in stuff that truly has upside? Or should we be holding and hoping that maybe there's an eventual rise down the road?
It depends what you put your money into. So I think if you were to one that just kind of lived off the entire hype of this pandemic spike and you were buying base PSA 10s, kind of just slabs, whatever slabs you can get your hand on, I would just basically, whenever you're in season or you see a spike game out of a player that you did that, I would just take your losses there. Try to time it the best of your ability and take your losses. I think if you went into you're still in the modern side of things, we went to patch auto and refractors, I'd be holding right now. I'd be holding the same way. I wouldn't be selling off every stock I had just because we're in a little bit of a recession. I don't think it's worth selling at the bottom for things that do have some scarcity level. Things will rebound. I'm sure of that. I can't give you a window into when, but I think, if it's stuff that we've kind of been telling you now for a year plus that we wouldn't be interested in investing in, or we wouldn't be interested in putting a lot of money into, as far as ultra modern base, super high pop stuff, even just like super hype names, things like that, I would be looking to take your outs when you can get them. If it's a basketball player, you probably won't really have that during the offseason. So if you just want to take your outs, take them. If it's a baseball player, you're going to have some opportunity here. Baseball's doing okay right now relative to the rest of the market. So I think it's an interesting time to kind of get out of those positions if you want to. But yeah, anything with scarcity and even if it's modern, I would be, if you can afford to, I would still be holding and try to weather the storm personally. I want to take that and move on to two positive signs for me. And the reason I'd be doing that, one is we're still seeing on-field performance indicative of value, even in your modern stuff. We talk about Andrew Wiggins from basketball. Let's talk about my guy in baseball and the Yankees. We haven't spoken much about my Yankees.
Yeah.
But my God, it's the best season they've had in 60 years or something like that up to this point. We're 31 games over 500 right now, by far the best team in the league. Aaron Judge is on pace for 65 home runs. His stuff, if you look at his card ladder index over the last month, I just had it up here, is up 40%.
Wow.
By far the most I'm seeing of this group here. You're seeing the F1 guys up, you're seeing guys like Wiggins up, and then you're seeing guys like Aaron Judge up. So, what that tells me is two things. One, he was way undervalued. But two, people are saying, wow, this guy is on pace for having an all-time great potential year on an all-time great or a fantastic team. And it's reflected in the fact that his stuff is skyrocketing up. Now it's the market correcting itself a little bit, but it's also people wanting to get in on a guy that's showing that he is a level above even what we thought he was. So there will be, that's a good sign to me. That's a really good sign is basically all I want to say. Like, I think it signs like just the fact that things like that are still happening mean people are willing to, get in on players that may be undervalued.
Yeah. Looking through this card ladder index, now that you bring up Judge's name, up 39.6% monthly change. That's fantastic to see based off of performance. Wiggins up 77.9%. Obviously, we know the story there, but even looking further down, it's crazy to see that you can still find these pockets even in this down market. Jalen Hurts up 23%. I would imagine a lot of that is off the hype of the AJ Brown and the stuff that they've done in the draft, and hoping that he takes another leap, whether you believe that.
And our podcast last week, right? Probably.
Exactly. I mean, we're obviously moving markets with our two viewers. So we appreciate both of you out there for going and finding some Jalen Hurts cards to buy. Josh Allen up 20%, obviously a market mover for us as well. Shout out to us. But I mean, it's really encouraging to see this as you look down the board for names that you would expect. Mac Jones up 9%, names that you would expect to be moving based off of whether it be hype heading into the season, hype that their teams the additions that their teams made during the offseason, or just guys like Judge and Andrew Wiggins, who are simply performing based off of performing better in the card market based off of on-field or on-court performance. That's been a big thing that we've talked about. I mean, that's the reason why we started this podcast, was trying to find those pockets of players and cards that we can identify that will move based off of some on-court performance that we think is predictive and that we think that we're better than the market at predicting. So seeing that is awesome. I'm happy. I can say and report that I am happy for Aaron Judge and your New York Yankees that his card market is hot right now.
Me too. That'll bring me into my last overall point, which is we spoke about what to do with your money. Should we be panicking? Where should we turn? Whatever. Let's talk about buying dips. Let's talk about off-season buying. Let's talk about going into the dog days of summer. If you're lucky enough to be in an okay spot financially and you're interested in spending some money, let's talk about what makes sense to do. We just talked about vintage. I think wherever you can kind of put your money into that, it's a pretty good place to be right now. It's kind of like investing in your gold, if you will, during a dip. I think it's really safe, really, really strong place to be. Let's talk about modern though, and ultra modern. There are opportunities here, I think, during this offseason, especially let's talk basketball. I mean, let's go a month, 2 months down the line. We're past the craziness of free agency. And we should talk, by the way, real quick aside, we're going to be off for 3 weeks. You'll get probably about 2 weeks by the time you hear this episode, but we'll be off about 2.5 weeks. By the time we're back, NBA draft will have happened. NBA free agency will be pretty much most big stuff should have already happened. We talked about those kind of things as they come. There will be opportunities for you guys. They're selling opportunities as a big name gets moved, whatever. Just, if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, you know how to handle those situations. So yeah. I think just keep that in mind. But I think things that, just keep an eye out for weird auctions that are happening in the off season during a dip, during, an off season, that there'll be opportunities for you to pick up some colored refractors, things like that I think of the top 15, 20 guys in the league, I have no problem buying the dip on. And let's hope by the time next basketball season rolls back around, the economy's in a healthier place. And either your investment will be looking good if you were looking for a long-term, or you'd be able to kind of take some profits because you bought the dip. So I think there are opportunities like that. I think even as far up to as the LaMelo, Anthony Edwards guys, I'm not going to advocate buying super ultra modern stuff, but if you can get like out of 99s, PSA 10s, things like that, I don't mind it, because I think by the time our basketball finally rolls back around, let's hope in October, let's really hope the economy's in a better spot. And even if it's not, there's going to be enough hype just kind of with basketball coming back. You should be able to, my hope would be, at least make your money back if that's where you need to go. So
I think that's the perfect thesis and the perfect spot to wrap up this podcast on. Just keeping an eye on. I mean, it sounds so simple, and I think we just gloss over that point. Save the searches of players that you want to invest in, or cards that you want to invest in, and you'll get notified by eBay if you so choose. And then you can just keep an eye on those auctions. Favorite them. You'll get the notification when the auction's about to end in 24 hours and 14 minutes. However you so choose to keep an eye on those things. You can do it on your computer, on mobile, but you will catch times. And I know, Gary, you've been really successful at this too. You will catch times where auctions in 10, 15, 20% below comps just because of randomness, right? And not even just because of a down market. So I think that's an extremely good point. Something that I've been lazy doing lately is favoriting cards that I'm interested in. I know I've probably missed out on a few buying windows myself too. So I appreciate you reiterating that point. Anything else we need to mention before we leave the people for what's going to be about 2 or 3 weeks?
No, but just again, F1, vintage, super low pop. I think those are good places to be right now.
I love that our calls on the niche markets have paid off, especially F1. That was an extremely sharp call by you, and just so obvious now in hindsight that market was going to take off with international, with the Drive to Survive series, with the American hype. Now that's only going to continue. I can only imagine that market keeps going up.
Yeah, and obviously I have a lot of just everyday action in that market, and I've seen that even throughout the hype, even throughout the economic dip, the hype has remained there pretty much completely. I have no problem selling F1 cards when I want to. I have offers on big F1 cards. I can't really buy F1 cards I'm interested in at any major dips. So yeah, the 2020 stuff I'm way more interested in than the 2021, but pretty safe place to be, I would say. And we're only 8 races into the season, so you have a while more of the active season for F1.
This was ended up being a lot more positive than I was anticipating, with talking about a market that we're seeing stocks, crypto, NFTs, everything seemingly down. So I feel like we found some pockets here and there where we can be putting our money. I'm excited for you to get back because we will be back with a BBM3 draft. We did a BBM2 draft and tried to talk through the NFL card market the best we could, as we had a 30-second clock, and try to navigate a draft while discussing player card markets. But we didn't win $1 million last year, just so we could win $2 million this year and split it. I hope we can do that, friend. Have fun on your trip. We will see you again in 3 weeks.
Thanks, man. And happy Father's Day to you coming up. By the time people listen to this, it probably already been Father's Day, but all the fathers out there, happy Father's Day to them. Enjoy the beginning of everyone's summer. We'll see you in mid-July. Take care, everybody.